for today. Okay, so your first assignment is in the assignments tab, and I will show you what it is you need to do. So I had to make a couple adjustments to the syllabus. So the first part of your assignment, you're basically doing this in 4 parts. And the first part is simply for you to submit a plan. What kind of app do you want to build and publish in the Google Play Store? Okay, so you have a week to figure this out. So the first part is basically 5 easy percent of your final grade. Okay, so you're basically going to submit this Word document to me where you put in your name, you're going to put in a description of your project, you're going to explain the utility of the project, and then you're going to create a new private repository on GitHub and add me as a collaborator. You don't have to put any code in the repository, you just have to set it up. Okay. Now, before you submit this document, so this document is due next Thursday, but before you submit it, you first have to submit your project idea on this little website I've set up. And the reason for this is because everyone's app has to be unique. So I don't want to get 10 projects, 10 apps that all do the same thing. So before you submit this document to me, you need to go to the project website, check out the other project ideas that have already been submitted, and then submit your own for approval. So I'll show you. Sorry, whoever's mic is on, if you can. So here's how the project submission website works. So you're going to click the link and come here. You're going to choose your section. So I'm using this for all of my classes. Some of the other instructors are using it as well, as you can see. So you're going to pick our COMP3025 section and you click View Projects. So this is going to show you all of the other app ideas submitted by your classmates. Right? To give you an idea of what this looks like for one of my other classes. So each student submits, so before you submit, you can review the ideas. This is another course, this is for my ASP.NET course. So you're going to review the ideas here and make sure that no one has already submitted and been approved for the idea you want to submit. Then you're going to click submit and you go back to your section and you submit here and you just put in your student email and put in a description, maybe 1 to 3 sentences explaining what is the app you want to build. So before you can complete this Word document and submit it on Blackboard, you first need to submit your idea here and have me approve it. When you submit here, it's going to send me an email, and then I will come to the site. I'll answer your question 1 second, Nadia. So I can see your project ideas. Oops. And then I will either approve it or decline it. And when I send this back to you, you'll get an email notification either saying your project idea has been approved, or it will say it hasn't been approved. And if I have comments as to why, they'll appear in here. Well, Nadia, this is the only Android class. So all those other classes, those are other courses. So some of them are Java, some of them are ASP.NET. If you want to use one of those ideas, if your idea overlaps with someone in another course that's doing a different technology, that's fine. But it has to be unique in our class. So for example, I can't have two people can't build workout tracker apps for this. Whoever submits it, and I approve them in the order they are submitted. So the sooner you approve your idea, the less likely it is that somebody else will already have taken the idea that you want.
How detailed do you have to be for like the description?
Well, you can sort of see here if you look at the other sections. It doesn't have to be incredibly detailed, just a general idea of what is the app and what does it do. So
Okay,
you can view the other sections here. So if you just want to click Delano, you can get an idea of, usually a sentence or two is sufficient. So you don't have to log in here. And also, it's anonymous. So no one else will see when you're looking at the projects. You will not see whose project belongs to who. I can see which student submitted which project, but you won't see them. You're only seeing the project descriptions.
also, if we ever like the idea now, are we allowed to submit it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so submit it on the project website. I am pretty responsive at approving them, typically within the same day. I review them because I do get an email notification. And once I've approved your idea, then you can complete this simple Word document and post it to Blackboard. So this is due next Thursday at 5 o'clock. Okay. This is not a group project. Everybody has to build their own app. So I also had to adjust in the syllabus, the grading a little bit. I think I'll show you the change that I made in the syllabus. My math wasn't very good, and the totals for the assignments didn't actually add up to 100. They added up. Originally, I think I had in here that assignment 1 was 15%, which made everything add up to 105. So 1A is 5%. So this is a really easy 5%. Just fill out the Word document and create the Git repository. And sorry, this should say, I have to update this as well. The next phase will be your app design. So 1B will also be 5%. So I'm just going to update this document. Does anybody have any questions about this part of the assignment and what you need to do for next week? Okay, yep. Figure out what kind of app do you want to build. It's both, me, Sam. So you're going to have to design some activities, some screens, and build the UI. But there will need to be. It can't just be a UI. There has to be some functionality to it that's going to require you to code in Kotlin. So it has to be both. So I will just update. So your proposal's 5 and your design is 5. I will just update that document now. Kartik, I'll give out that part of the assignment next week. Basically, you're just going to do some mock-ups and you'll submit it as a PDF. I guess, yeah, so that actually is here. So if you want to see assignment 1B, the requirements are there, but I'll go over it next week. So you're basically going to start to think about the design and what are the screens going to look like that you'll need. But I'll go over that requirement next week. Okay, any other questions about assignment 1? Okay, if there are no other questions, if something else comes to you during class, then feel free to let me know. So I'm just going to go back to lesson 2. Okay, so just before we dive back into Android Studio, wanted to do a quick review of last week. So rather than me going over things, here's what I want you to do. Just close out my poll here for a second. So there's a link here in the lesson 2 folder that says intro review. I want you to open up this link. Please don't download the file. I want you to edit it in your browser. Okay, so we can all be editing the file at the same time. So everybody in the class have downloaded the class roster. Blackboard gives me a nice dump to Excel. So do not open this in your desktop app. Edit it in your browser. So beside your name, just put in a brief sentence or phrase. What's one thing from last week's class that you learned about Android or Kotlin? So you can edit this, should be able to edit this file in your browser. To say, please don't download it or open it in the desktop app because it will lock the file for everybody. Yep, so don't take your name out. So yeah, you just edit column C beside your name. First thing that comes to mind, what did you learn that was useful last week? Again, here's the link. It's the intro review item inside of lesson 2. Hi, Kenneth. Welcome to the class. So if to catch up on week 1, there's material in the lesson 1 folder. And in the tools and resources folder is the link to the code on GitHub and the YouTube playlist. So you can watch the recordings from last week's class on YouTube. May Sam, that's frightening. It doesn't actually matter. You can use your regular Windows account for this file. You don't have to sign in with your Georgian account. I don't even think you have to sign in at all. I think you can edit this just as a guest because I made the file public to anybody who has the link. Okay, Andrew, I'm just going to push you a bit more on your answer. So you've said what Kotlin is and why we should use it. So maybe you could explain why is that we should use it. All right, that's a great answer, Edwin. You put a lot of content in one box. That's great. Yep. So we use the XML for our markup and the .kt file. That's right, Shay stuff. That's got for our code. Yeah, Jamie, you're right. We refer to screens as activities. Deep for sure. Kotlin is definitely easier to read, and our code is lighter. Yeah, Pete, you've mentioned the same thing. That's right. Yep, Kival, if you want to finish yours, what did we use to give a notification? We used the class. Maybe you want to mention it. Yep, Cedarum, that's a really good point about null pointer exception. So we're going to do some work. Yep, Kartik, that's right. You put in the chat, it's the toast object. So we're going to do some work looking at nulls and seeing today how Kotlin deals with nulls in ways that will hopefully reduce a lot of the null pointer exceptions that we get. Piyush, yeah, we try not to hard code text in our layouts, but we use the resource files. And you mentioned the toast object. Alan, yeah, Android is just how popular it is. Yeah, Bikramjit, that's a really good point about multi-language support, that we use those resource files for to help us with multi-language support, so we're not hard coding text in our app in one language. Yeah, Michael, that's right. Android's got about 75%. Andre, it runs on everything, and Kotlin is definitely the direction that Google is moving in for sure for new development. Yeah, hidden activities consist of views. All right, that's a pretty good list. I think we've hit on pretty much all of the main things. So lots of lots of good takeaways that you've listed here. I think all these things are relevant, but you guys have listed almost all of the kind of most relevant things that I wanted you to get out of one. Yeah, Tim, that's also a good point that our Kotlin code is interoperable with Java. So we may have files where, even though they're .kt files and we're writing Kotlin, where we might make a call to a Java function, or we might write a little bit of Java. And you'll see that particularly we'll be referring to Java classes when we look at navigating from one screen to another, or from within our app, we want to then invoke another app on the phone. We want to have a browser link that opens in the mobile browser. We want to use the phone dialer or the camera. So we're going to see calls to Java classes for those things. All right. Looks like most people have finished, so that's great. I'm happy with this list. And again, you think Android programming looks harder than Swift programming. Interesting to deal. We'll see as we go. I think a lot of developers find the opposite, but that may be the case, that you find that Swift is simpler. I haven't found that to be the case, but you certainly might. Okay, so that's a great list. So this is really a good little reference for you. I'll leave this spreadsheet up, but we'll probably do a number of these. It won't always be a spreadsheet, but we'll try to do little review exercises like this, just to kind of get us thinking collectively about what did we remember, and then when we're seeing each other's notes, yeah, it might change. When we're seeing each other's notes, it also, your classmates are maybe helping remind you of things that you didn't think of, but things that we did go over in the previous class. All right, so I'm going to leave that tab up. We may come back to it. So I put up a really simple slide deck for today. I think we've only 4 or 5 slides. And as I said, today's lesson is kind of 2 parts. So the first part is going to be Kotlin only. Then the second part will be mostly playing around with layouts in the XML layout designer. And then we'll add a little bit of code. So we went over some of these syntax rules last week. I'll just go over them again. So some of the ways that Kotlin is more lightweight than Java for Android. We don't need semicolons to terminate our statements. We don't need the override decorator on event handlers. We have the fun keyword instead of using function. And we're going to play around with some of these things today. We've got val for immutable variable. So basically for constants, we're going to use val. We're going to use var for regular variables, where we can set the value and then change the value. We'll use var. We can use it. We may do an example. So this refers to a value inside a lambda. Question mark, which you may have seen in some other languages. This would mean that something is optional for either a parameter or a data type, an optional value. We have let, which we also have in JavaScript. It's different in JavaScript. So let in JavaScript basically is like a constant. It's like val in Kotlin, whereas let in Kotlin is checking if a value is null. So we'll play around with this construct. We also have this fun operator called the Elvis operator. Has anyone used or seen the Elvis operator before? The Elvis operator is neat. It allows us to, yeah, Priyesh, you've used it. Priyesh, do you want to explain what it is? Yeah, that's right. So it allows us to check if a value is null, and if it is, we can use another value. Yeah, so it's sort of it's a ternary. That's right. Hayden, that is exactly what it is. It's ternary syntax. So the actual name of the Elvis operator, this is kind of fun. So there's some more reading on the Elvis operator here. So you can have a look at these links. One is from the official documents from Kotlin. And then there's also a good description here from Stack Overflow. So the name comes from Elvis Presley because the shape of his hair, when it's all slicked back, his hair was shaped like a question mark and with 2 dots. So this is where we actually get the name, the Elvis operator from. But yeah, it's basically ternary. So we can check for null. And if a value is null, we can use another value instead. So we'll play around with some of this stuff. We'll just kind of write some Kotlin code in a unit testing project. And then we'll come back and look at these couple other slides. And these are more to do with layouts. Yeah, they are. Okay, so what we'll do, let's create a new project for today. Again, this is kind of a throwaway project like last week's. We're not going to build on it. Next week, we will set up a project and we'll work on that one project through the lessons for the rest of the semester. But today, we just want to play around with these language constructs in Kotlin and also some other layout elements. So I'm just going to create a new project. And I'll use the same option I used last week, which is an empty activity. And I'm just going to call it F20 lesson 2. And I'm going to leave the rest of the defaults kind of like I did last week. Make sure your language defaults to Kotlin, not Android. Sorry, Kotlin, not Java. And I'm going to leave the recommended minimum SDK here as API 23. So about 85% of Android devices would be able to run my app. And then I'll click finish, and Android Studio is going to set up and build a new project for me. All right, 34 participants. I have to say, your attendance and participation so far this semester has been awesome. And I know it's early in the semester, sometimes that tends to drop off, but it's great to see so many people attending in class, and at least we're trying to learn together. I know it can be challenging in this environment. So we get our main activity, which is going to have our Gradle build engine here. So we're going to come back to the main activity later in our Kotlin file. And you'll notice over here on the left, in my Android view, I've got a Java folder. And this is just by convention, Android Studio names the folder Java, even if we're running in Kotlin. So we have 3 different projects. This lesson 2, this is actually the actual application UI and code. The application code, is here in main activity. But then we also get a couple of testing projects. So this one down here, it says test in brackets. This is the last one. I'm going to expand that. And it actually has a little class here with a sample unit test. And here we can see it's got a method, one function that starts with the fun keyword. It's got a at test declaration. And this class uses JUnit, which I know you've used before for unit testing. So I can actually run this unit test. If I just right click, I can run my unit test. So we'll let Gradle build the app. And I'll run the unit test. Yeah, it is very similar. Hayden, I don't think we are going to be doing test-driven development. We're just going to write some tests today just so we can play around with some of the Kotlin language constructs. So we can see how val, var, let. Yeah, sorry about that. It's probably something I should look at doing. So our unit test runs and our test passes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new class in here. So if I right click this test project, I'm going to pick a new Kotlin file /class. And let's see, so I'm going to pick class, and actually on second thought, I'm going to make a file because we'll put multiple classes in here. We'll just call it Kotlin language. So just an empty Kotlin file. We'll probably make a few classes in here. So first we want to look at val and var and how they work differently in Kotlin. So I'm going to create a class. First in here, I'll create a test class. We'll call it vars test. So we want to write a couple of unit tests to experiment a little bit with how var and val work. So I'll create a unit test. We'll call this one read only. And my code editor is saying, well, you can't have this unit test declaration unless you make a reference to the JUnit test class. So I'll just hit Alt and Enter, and I'll import my unit test. Fun is the Kotlin word for function. Just shorter than typing function. We type fun. We'll just put in a comment here. Yep, your editor might import. Yeah, JetBrains is pretty smart. Okay, so let's create a variable. Flavor. Somebody tell me, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? If you were going for ice cream after class today, what would you order? All right. So we're going to assign a value. Wow, Moose Tracks is popular. Banana Boat. Bubblegum. Oh, Nadia, that's awful. Rum raisins. Piyush, that's very sophisticated. Okay, so let's give it a variable. You can give it any. That's fine. Delano, there's always a vanilla fan in every class. So you can assign any value you want to the flavor variable. Okay. Now what happens when we try to change the variable's value? So if I try to reassign the variable, the Kotlin compiler complains, right? It's saying you cannot reassign flavor because it's been declared with val. So I won't even be able to run this test. I don't think I can run it because Gradle shouldn't even be able to build. Yeah, so the unit test doesn't even run. It's not that it fails. Our compiler actually catches it and says any variable declared with val can't be reassigned. Okay, so val in Kotlin is a constant. So the only way I can get this test to pass without changing line 10 is I just have to comment that out. Now I can run my test. And it'll pass. So trying to change a val in Kotlin is like trying to change a const in Java or C#. Can't do it. So let's create a second variable called change var. In this case, we'll use var. So we can declare and assign, declare our variable, assign a value to it. Now I can change my value. This time I don't get any compile errors. And we can run our test and it should work fine. So when we've used var, our test passes. So we want to be careful when we use val and when we use var. If we're setting something up that we know we never want the value to be changeable, then we should use val, because the code editor, the IDE, is going to point it out to us if we try to change it. If the variable can possibly be reset, we should be declaring it with var instead. Fairly simple concept, I think. So there's val and var. Any questions so far? Does that seem pretty clear? Yeah, I figured you guys are third-year students. You know, constants are not a new thing so far, but thanks for letting me know. Okay, so we're going to create a few functions in the file outside of the class. So we'll set up a simple multiplication function where we have two integers as input parameters, we multiply them together, and we return the product back. So we'll create a function called multiply. So the method signature in Kotlin will look like this. We'll set up a parameter called left that's declared as an int. We'll set up a second parameter called right, and maybe we'll give the right a default value. And this method returns an int. Okay, a couple of good questions. Hayden, if you wanted to test something from the main activity, you can import that class. So if you imported the activity class in your unit test, you would then be able to test it. Priyesh, it is possible to do test-driven development. That's maybe something, I will be honest with you, I didn't give a lot of consideration to. It probably is something I should give some consideration to. I wanted to focus more on just the basics of Android. But it is, I guess, would be something to consider for me to think about doing TDD in the future. But I'll be honest with you, it's really not, the course really isn't set up that way at this point. But good question, and it is, and that's a great suggestion. Yeah, that's part of my other challenge is, you know, I have to stick to the learning. I have to focus on the learning outcomes of the course, and the learning outcomes are around building mobile apps. So there aren't any specific learning outcomes in the official outline. That's not the syllabus. This is like the program outline that speak to TDD. Doesn't mean I can't do it, but I have to be careful that I wouldn't want students to get bogged down in TDD concepts, which would prevent them from meeting the mobile learning outcomes. But it is a good question. It's something we're going to have some conversation. It's our 3-year program renewal is coming up. We're having those conversations. So TDD really is something I think we need to figure out, where is there an appropriate place for it? Maybe it's in the systems project. But that's a conversation we need to have. So thanks for bringing that up. So just for comparison, let's write, just as a comment, so there's our method header in Kotlin. What would this look like in Java? So how would you write this same method definition? Not the code inside the method, but just the header part. what would this look like in Java? I'll just put it in here as a comment above so we can kind of compare, do an apples to apples comparison of what a Kotlin method might look like compared to a Java method. Okay, yeah, and what would go what would go at the beginning of that? Yeah, so we'd probably have public, static. Our return type in Java is going to appear before the method name. And then the data type appears before the parameter name. Okay, so the syntax is a little bit different. Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Edwin. Right, so in Kotlin, our return type is at the end of the method after the parameters. We've got a colon in the return type. In Java, we have it first. We've got to declare the scope of the method in Java. We use static, which we don't have here. We just have fun instead. And again, in Java, we've got data type first and then parameter name. Whereas in Kotlin, we declare the parameter name, colon, and the data type second. Okay. So, yeah, and we've got lowercase I and uppercase as well. Okay, so I know everybody is familiar with this syntax. You guys have done a lot of Java. So I wanted to add it in here just so you can see the direct comparison of how that Java translates to Kotlin. Okay, so let's maybe set up another class in here where we can make some different calls to our multiply function and see how it works. So I'll make a class called funTest. We can do it in the same file. And we'll write a few unit testing functions here. We'll call this params test. So we want to call our multiply method in a couple of different ways. We use print line. So first we'll just pass in any numbers. Right? We can pass in any two numbers, and this should print a result. Where we're multiplying them together. So by default, if our method takes two params and we pass in two, Kotlin automatically will assign the first one here and the second one here, just the way Java or any other language would. Now, typically we want to assign parameter values in the same sequence, the same order that they appear in our method signature, but we don't have to. So we could do this. So if we want, we can specify the parameters by name rather than by their sequence. So our test should still pass here. I know we're not really asserting anything. I mean, we don't typically do this, but we have the ability to supply those parameters by name if we want to. Yes, that's right, Kartik. So let's say we have a lot of parameters. It can be difficult to make sure we're supplying them in the right order. So if you provide the parameter names in the function call, then the sequence is overlooked or ignored. Exactly. You might, but you have to have an object. You need to have an object class that would contain all of the properties you want, which we may have, we may not have. Let's also look, maybe let's try see how this default value works. We'll write a couple more tests. So we'll get to a break soon. Let's just write a couple more. We'll call this one default val test. So in this case, we only want to supply a value for left. So if we don't supply a second parameter value, right, if I don't supply a second parameter value, my right parameter defaults to 1. Again, we could provide a named parameter here as well if we want. So it will take the parameters by sequence, or we can specify a specific parameter. Good question. Let's try it. I'll just run it like this just to show that it works both ways. Yeah, so what happens here? So if we take out the default, it actually doesn't even compile now, right? Because without a default value here, our call to multiply, our signature is 2 required parameters. So we can't run this. It won't even compile. So I'm not even going to be able to run the test at this point, right? Because our call to the method doesn't match the method signature without that default value. So that's going to fail at design time. Okay. All right. It's 5 to 12. Does anybody have any questions about? I want to do a little more work in this file. We haven't really gotten into the nullability yet, but yes. So to comment out a selected block of code, you can highlight it and just click Control/. To uncomment, you do the same thing. Control/ will uncomment. Yeah. Good question, Michael. Yep, whatever's highlighted. Or yes, otherwise it'll just do the current line. Okay, it's 5 to 12, so let's take a 10-minute break here, and I will stop my recording. We'll come back in 10 minutes.